All right, guys, we're going to go over section 3 notes here. When you get these, just go ahead and write them down. And you'll be able to use these for your test. Your test will be Friday. If you haven't looked on Canvas, on the announcements, I put for the week what's going on this week, how we're going to do things. Your test will be Friday. I'll publish that towards the end of the week, and you'll have Friday to take it. And I would ask that you not use your notes or your book. Obviously, I can't police that, but I'm just going to trust that you're going to take the test and not use those things when you get there. So, all right, so section 3, we're going to talk about North American people. We've talked about the major civilizations in Central and South America. But while all that's going on, there are other groups in present-day North America, Canada, the United States, that were flourishing as well. Not as big or as large, but still highly intelligent, and did a lot of things that will be examples for future people to come. Okay, so by 1500, there's going to be around 2 million people that live north of Mesoamerica. If you remember, we said Mesoamerica, it's Middle America, Mexico, the countries of Central America. So basically in Canada and the present-day United States, there's going to be about 2 million people, and they're going to speak about 300 different languages. So if you think about it, that's a lot of languages for not just a whole lot of people. But the one thing that all these people had in common was that they had to learn to adapt to their environments to survive. And really, even the civilizations that we've talked about already, they all had to take what nature gave them, and they had to learn how to adapt to that so that they can survive. So we'll talk about people who are farther up north where it's colder, obviously, have to find different ways to build homes. They have to find ways to get food. People further south, obviously, don't have to have as many clothes. They can hunt and fish and do different things that possibly people in the north can't. Okay, but we'll get to all those things. But everyone in these areas are learning to adapt to their environments, because if they don't, then they don't survive at all, and they die. So, in Central and Eastern North America, you might call that the Midwest, the Ohio River Valley, present-day Midwest and Ohio River valleys. There were what was called mound building cultures, and they were called mound builders because just that they built mounds. Some served as tombs or burial grounds. Some would have temples on top, where they would host or hold religious ceremonies. They were used for all different purposes. The 3 mound building cultures that we know about, one was the Adena, who flourished from around 800 BC to about 200 AD. You had the Hopewell, that was from around, I think, 200 BC to around 500 AD. And then the Mississippians won't come along until about 900 AD. So different time periods, but they were known as mound building cultures because of the mounds that they built. Some of you may have possibly been down to just south of Little Rock to the Toltec mounds here in Arkansas. Those were mound building cultures. They built mounds down around Scott, Arkansas, and you can actually go there today. You can walk around, see the different mounds that were built. I don't know if you've been there, but you can actually go and see those things. Mounds have been dug up where they find different artifacts. They found that there were tombs. I said used for all different types of things. Just a picture of a mound in the form of a serpent. It looks like a snake that was built. One of the largest mounds was in present-day Illinois. It's called Cahokia. Very similar to the temples or ziggurats of the civilizations in Mesoamerica and South America. At the height of its civilization, there were around 20,000 people that lived around Cahokia. This is the main mound here. It was surrounded by farmland where they grew crops. There was a temple on the top of this mound. Okay, and again, you can go to these places even today. But like I said, it reached like about 100 feet in the air. But if you see right here on this, I don't know if you can see on the screen here on the road here, you see a car. That car looks pretty tiny, so you can actually tell just how big that mound is compared to a car there. So gives you a perspective as to how big it was. Okay, in the Southwest, you had groups like the Hohokam and the Anasazi. These two groups are going to flourish. I know the Anasazi was from around 1 to 1300, and then the Hohokam was a little bit before them, and but again flourishing kind of around the same time. These people were known as cliff dwellers. So you had the cliff dwellers, you had the mound builders, some of the early civilizations in present-day America. And again, they're called cliff dwellers because that's exactly what they were. They built their homes in the sides of cliffs, known as pueblos. Some of you may have actually traveled down to the Southwest before and actually visited some of those ruins that are still there today. The most famous is Mesa Verde, which is that's the picture of this right here. I know you could used to walk around these ruins. I'm not sure if you still can. I think they were kind of vandalized at one point. I think they put a stop to actually walking up into those areas. But you can visit here, and some of you may have actually done that. I don't know. They're very, very good at learning to irrigate, so they could. It's very dry, so they learned to bring water from other sources in order to feed their crop. Also, building on the sides of cliffs gave them a lot of protection from other groups who might want to attack and try to take them over. It's very hard to attack somebody that's living on the side of a cliff. So safety, irrigation, some of the different reasons that they built their homes in these areas. We'll talk about some other groups here, some smaller groups, but we're going to talk about different regions in the present-day U.S. and Canada, and some of the different tribes that live there, and how they went about adapting or learning to survive in those areas. So first, we're going to talk about the far north. Okay, this is basically present-day Canada, up present-day Alaska, and up around the Arctic Ocean and those regions. Very, very cold. Okay, but a lot of historians think that they arrived by boat around 3000 BC, and it probably wouldn't be crazy to think that some of these individuals possibly even walked across Beringia and then just settled and stayed and didn't continue to wander to other parts. So they possibly crossed the land bridge and they just decided to learn how to survive and stayed where they were. One of the most well-known tribes in that area is called the Inuit. That is known as the people. So, I'm not sure why that name was given to them, called the people, but that's what we know, the Inuit. They're famous for their igloos, or just their homes that made of ice. They would build these big ice blocks and they would stack them up. They could live in there. I mean, they were so well put together they could actually build fires in there and they would not melt. So they were able to survive in these ice houses. They hunted seal, whale, walrus, polar bear. Again, things that you might think would be up in that region. Again, they used all parts of these animals. One of the main parts that they used from these animals was the blubber, and they would use that for cooking. They would also use that for oil for lamps, and they could burn the oil and the blubber from these animals. It would burn very, very well. But again, the hides of the bear, the seal, they could make, and the walrus, they could make clothes. The bones, they could make tools. They could make weapons. But all the parts of these animals were used for something. Again, just a picture of the Inuit and their igloo as they're sitting around. Um, again, you can see obviously in the cold they got to wear the heavier clothes. I'm not sure the clothes look like that, because it looks like they're wearing jackets and pants that have been sewn. I'm not sure that's what they look like. It's probably more along the lines of wearing sealskin and polar bear furs and different things in order to keep warm. All right, so the West Coast. Along the West Coast, this area is in present-day Canada as well, just not as far north. But along the West Coast, present-day Washington, present-day Oregon, and even parts of California. So that whole area up and down that West Coast is the region we're talking about here. Some of the tribes there, the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Chinook, were located in those areas, especially in the northern part of the West Coast. Trees were in abundance in these areas, so they use trees to help build their homes. They use trees to help, so that they could build ocean-going canoes. They would build these huge canoes that they could fit, 8 to 10 large men in, and they could go out. They could hunt for whales and other things in the ocean. This is also the group that was known for their totem poles. If you've never seen a totem pole, it's got many different faces. It represented the clan of those people. It was also thought that it would ward off evil spirits and keep them safe. So they would build and paint these totem poles and set up around their villages. Again, fish for seals, otters, whales, things that were around them. Salmon out of the rivers was a huge part of the diet of these individuals. One of the most populated areas of the West Coast was California. It's kind of like today. The state of California is one of the most populated states that we have. Even back then, a lot of different tribes lived in this region, and so it was very heavily populated. Some of those that were known for living there, the Chumash, the Cahuilla, and the Pomo. Again, these tribes you've probably never heard of, but I'm listing a few of them here just for the sake of your notes here. Make sure when we study for our test, you'll know some of the tribes that were located in these regions. I may ask you what region the Chumash, Cahuilla, and Pomo, where did they thrive? And you need to tell me, the West Coast. So I'm not going to make you write them all out, but you will need to know where some of these tribes lived. Picture of a totem pole, I said, in case you've never seen one. The different faces represented different things that they thought kept them safe. See the eagle, looks like some kind of dragon or something here, maybe, I don't know. And it was meant to ward off the evil spirits. And it represented, like I said, the family and the clans that were a part of that family. Okay, the Southwest. In the Southwest, it's very, very dry. If you've ever been to places like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, okay, what we know is called the Four Corners, if you know where that's at. So again, they're having to learn to adapt. So they learned to make homes out of adobe. So they would make these sun-dried bricks. So they would take the dirt and some water, form bricks, and they would let it sit out in the sun for days, maybe even weeks. Well, those bricks would turn very hard, and they could then stack them, and almost like making a brick house like we have today. So they were able to, build their homes that way. Their main source of food was maize, which again we know is corn because we've talked about that before. And maize grows very well in drier climates. And some of the tribes that live there, the Hopi, the Pueblo, probably never heard of those, but you may have heard of the Apache and the Navajo. Maybe if you watch old Westerns or something like that, you've heard of those tribes, the Apache and the Navajo. When you see movies about cowboys and Indians, a lot of times those are some of the tribes that they talk about and portray in the different movies. So just a picture of an adobe house. Again, looks very similar to what we might know of today. Just a brick home that they built. All right, the Great Plains. These are more of the tribes that you may think of when you think Native Americans or when you think Indians. Um, I don't know if anytime you hear the term Indians, if you think of people living in teepees and hunting buffalo and all, just that's what I think of when I think of Indians. Well, these are those individuals, those groups that live in the Great Plains. Okay, they were mainly farmers, though. They did hunt some, but they mainly farmed, though it was very difficult. And it was difficult because even though the Great Plains was just massive plains and grasslands, the grasses on the Great Plains were so thick and the roots were so thick that you couldn't hardly dig into the ground to get to the soil to plant your crops. People later will actually learn to kind of dig squares out of the ground because it's so thick, and they'll make sod houses. It's so thick, it's almost like the adobe houses, but they're using sod instead of the adobe or the sun-dried bricks. They'll just cut out chunks of grass and dirt, and they'll stack it up, and they'll make their homes out of it. You'll learn about that later. The men did hunt buffalo. This was a staple for them. Again, used all parts of the animal, and buffalo were very sacred to them. Some of you may have seen the movie Dances with Wolves. I don't know. Okay, it's kind of the groups that we're talking about here. They were the ones that did live in teepees, and they did that because they were kind of nomadic. Where the buffalo went, these people went, because they did rely upon the buffalo quite a bit. And the teepees were easy to put up, take down, and then they could travel whenever they needed to. But groups like the Sioux, not the Sioux, but the Sioux, the Hidatsa, and the Pawnee were all tribes that lived on the Great Plains. And then just an old picture of actual teepees out on the plains. Okay, but these were really the only groups that were known for building teepees. A lot of these other individuals that we'll talk about actually built homes out of adobe, out of wood, whatever. All right, in the Northeast, people in the Northeast spoke one of two major languages. Okay, so they either spoke Algonquin or they spoke Iroquoian. We're going to talk more about the Iroquois here in just a second. But you spoke one or the other. So people could communicate pretty well in the Northeast region. The landscape, the environment in the Northeast was such that they kind of had a choice. They could farm, they could hunt, they could fish, because the resources were all there for them to do all of those things. So they didn't have to rely on one thing. They could do any of it. And some did all. Some farmed and they went hunting, they went fishing. Okay, so like I said, the resources for those tribes were very good. In the Northeast, this is really the first time that we see some of these groups start to set up confederations or governments that are going to link several tribes together and unify them against a certain cause, or bring them together to fight against a group or something like that. The most famous of those confederations was the Iroquois League. You may have heard of them before. There's going to be 5 original tribes, Iroquois tribes, that are going to come together and form this Iroquois League or this confederation. Later, a 6th tribe will come in. If you've read this section yet, I'm not sure if you have, but you've seen those 5. You have the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the Mohawk, the Seneca, and the Oneida. Those are the 5 original tribes of the Iroquois League. Later, a 6th tribe will come in called the Tuscarora, and they will all join together and unify together. And the main reason that they're coming together, I'm just going to put this up here, was to maintain peace amongst themselves, but also to oppose the Huron. The Huron was a group to the north that was known for its constant attacks on other groups. They were considered a nuisance by the Iroquois, and so they knew they needed to form this confederation to come together to oppose the Huron. Okay, it's going to be founded by the Mohawk leader Hiawatha. It was actually founded by him and another man, but you need to know the Mohawk leader Hiawatha that helped form this confederation. And we'll talk about the Iroquois League in another chapter as well when we talk about the British and other groups coming into the region. We'll get to that chapter 3, I believe. Southeastern people. This is present day southeastern United States. Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. Okay, that whole region that we know as the Southeast. This was also a woodlands area, kind of like the Northeast. They could farm, they could hunt, they could fish. Okay, rivers are in abundance in the Southeast. People like the Creek, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw. You've probably heard of some of those groups before, especially the Cherokee. And we'll talk more about the Cherokee later too. You may have heard of the Trail of Tears. We'll get to that when we talk about that, about the Indian removal, and in another chapter. Farming and rivers were essential. Most villages that you saw in this region were located on a river. Again, water for farming. They could water their crops. Rivers, obviously, not just for fishing, but they could grow crops. They could travel downriver and they could trade with other groups. And it was very easily done rather than walking and trying to carry something somewhere by hand. So they use it for water, for travel. But most villages were on rivers. And just a picture of a southeastern people's village. You could see the different types of homes that they built. Obviously, it's not teepees. They actually built their homes out of wood and different materials located along a river. So that's where most of those people were located. All right, so there are your Section 3 notes. Not real long, okay? So make sure you watch these. I don't care if you're actually writing these down. If it were me, I would, because if you don't, you're going to have to go back and rewatch these again to study for your test. So let's just go ahead and say write these down. Okay. Obviously, I can't make you, but in order to study for your test, you need to write these down so you can study these notes for your test. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Canvas. You can email me, whatever you need to do, and we'll continue on from there. Be looking for. Well, I'll stop there. I'll tell you about that later. So, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see what I can do.